Hey, Pastor, let me ask you this question. What kind of power are you wielding? Because as we all know, as pastors and ministry leaders, any kind of leadership, we wield power. And the question is, are we wielding power that is undermining our leadership and undermining the goals and the tasks and the mission that God has given us? Are we wielding power that is helping our cause, that is glorifying God, that is helping others? Are we using our influence and the position and the authority and the power that God has placed in our hands and in our voices and in our lives? Are we using that for the success of other people? Because the reality is we all have power. We all have a level of influence. And if you are a pastor or you're a ministry leader, you're in any position of leadership, you have more power than most. And what is always the challenge is that power is addictive and it can guide us and lead us in directions that God never intended us unless we're careful. And so the question is today, are you wielding power that is undermining your leadership or building your leadership? That's what we're going to explore in this episode. So let's get started. So the big question is this: how do pastors like us who remain focused on the mission of Jesus and serving our communities without being distracted by everything in the world around us, how do we increase our effectiveness while living a lifestyle that doesn't compromise our health, our families, or our personal relationships with Jesus? That's the question this podcast is going to answer. I'm Dr. Brandon Party Cooper, and welcome to the Ministry Hackers Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Ministry Hackers Podcast. I am so glad that you are here. I am so excited to be here myself. I'm glad to be back, bringing you new episodes, bringing you new content, and helping you in your endeavor to live your dream life in ministry so that you can pastor a growing church, a growing ministry, and enjoy your family, enjoy traveling, enjoy your hobbies, whatever it is that you want to do outside of ministry. I love helping you. And so I'm glad that you're here. I hope that you are doing well as you are watching this episode. And I'm excited to get into this topic because it comes from one of my mentors in a book that he wrote. And I'm excited to get into it because he has taught me so much. And this is something that I've learned not only from his books and from his sermons, but by watching his own personal life and watching him exemplify this one thing. And I'm excited to bring it to you today. But before I do that, I want to invite you. Let me ask you this question first. Are you happy with your website? And if you're happy with your website, great. Then you don't need to do anything or tweak anything. But if you're saying, I really wish that our church website would do more for us, would actually bring in new guests, would help us get information out. If your website just exists, or if it's there and it's kind of this afterthought or this frustration, or if it's so technically advanced that you really can't do anything with it, so you don't change it ever. If you're unhappy with your church website, I want to invite you to download my free guide to building a church website that is powerful, that is effective, and that's going to make a difference in your ministry. Do it in 30 days. That's it. 30 days. It's a step-by-step guide. It's really simple. It walks you every day. Do this, do this, do this. And in 30 days, you're going to have a website that doesn't only exist out there on the web, that's not just there for people to stumble upon and come to your church, maybe if they like the website. It's a website that is going to work for you. That's going to actively try to get people to come to church, actively keep your congregation engaged, engage your community out there, outside of the four walls of your church, a website that is going to do work for you once it's built and up and running. And so again, I want to invite you, download your free guide right now. Go to brandonpartycooper.com/30-day website, brandonpartycooper.com/30-day website. Download the free guide, walks you step by step through, and it'll show you exactly how you can build a website that's going to make a difference, work for you, reach your community, and make an impact for the kingdom of God. So again, brandonpartycooper.com/30-day website. Get your free guide right there and get started today. Okay, so what we're talking about today actually comes from a book from one of my mentors. So early on in my ministry, I was just finishing up Bible college, and I had I had been a youth pastor for about a minute, and realized the youth ministry was not my thing. I was not doing well at it. I didn't really enjoy it. I have a great deal of respect for all of the youth pastors out there, and I honestly thought I was going to do youth ministry my whole life. That was my plan until I actually was a youth pastor, and I realized that I was not very good at it. So I was in this season of life where I was feeling a little lost. I didn't know what to do or where to go, or what the next step was. I had gone back to college and finished up my master's degree. And along the way, I had started to meet with my pastor at the church that I attended, Pastor Jim Bradford. And I would sit down with him once a month at a Panera Bread, and we would sit there and I would fire questions at him. And he would just, if you've ever met Pastor Jim, he has this very calming, peaceful presence about him. He doesn't react. He doesn't just throw out answers. Every question that I would ask, he would be very thoughtful, and he just gave me such great wisdom in those months where I would sit down and talk with him and spend time with him. And I am forever grateful for it. And I always thought, I really wished that he would write more, because there was so much to learn from him in his years of ministry and his years of just being close to God, that I always wanted him to write more. And a few years ago, he wrote the book, Lead So Others Can Follow. And it's a wonderful book. And I want to encourage you to go get the book if you can. Again, it's James Bradford, Dr. James Bradford, Lead So Others Can Follow. Check it out because there's so much great wisdom in it. One of the things that he brings out in the book, and what I want to talk about today, is this notion of power. All of us, you, me, every leader out there, we have a degree of power. When I would teach college students who were going into full-time ministry, so these were students who were undergraduate students who were saying, hey, I'm called into full-time ministry, and we would train them and develop them and come alongside them and give them all the practical ministry training that they needed, as well as the Bible college experience. I would tell them all the time, I would say that if you can influence someone to go to Taco Bell with you right before curfew, then you have a degree of influence. You are able to move someone from this place to that place. Everybody, I would argue, has a degree of influence. Everybody. Now, there's lots of questions that come after that. Do they use their influence for good or for bad? Do they have a high degree or a low degree? All I'm saying is I think everybody has a degree, some level of influence. Now, for you and I, as pastors and ministry leaders and influencers in our community, we carry a great deal of influence. But the reality is that not all of us have been properly trained or, quite honestly, mentored to handle that power responsibly. And for some of us, it's on us because we're making poor decisions in our leadership. For the others of us, we have been given a high degree of influence and a high degree of power without the understanding of how to use it. And so what I want to ask today is, are you wielding the power that God has given you? Are you wielding that in such a way that is undermining your leadership, or is it helping you? Is it growing you? Most of all, is it impacting the people's lives around you? One of the biggest challenges I think we have in church ministry is that, and I think this has been the case in every church that I've been a part of and every church that I've worked with, is that we are highly dependent on volunteers. And there is always this sense that we need more volunteers. And as ministries grow, as things go well in the church, the ministries will grow because there's more people. And so there's more need. And so there's always this sense that we never have enough volunteers to fill all the ministry needs that we have. And what usually happens, and maybe this has happened to you, maybe this is where you are, or maybe you've been there at some point. You come into a position and you kind of get your feet in and you're getting settled and things are going well. God's blessing what you're doing. God's reaching people and touching people's lives. And the ministry starts to grow. And there's a point, and we all reach this, all of us, there's a point where our influence level surpasses our experience level. We are having to lead beyond what we've ever done before, and we have no idea how to do that. And usually there are two choices. Pretty much every time there's two choices. We have the choice where we can start to lean into power that is manipulative, or power that is controlling, power that is maybe a little subversive, or power that is maybe a little, I don't really want to say underhanded, but a little bit. Like we essentially start to lean on our intuition to lead people without proper training or skill set or whatever. So we have the choice. We go that way, where we begin to lead in such a way that's hurtful and harmful and controlling, or we start to seek out growth, leadership growth, growing in our understanding of leadership, growing in our skills of leadership, and we begin to grow into the leadership that God has given us. Now, what I've seen many times is pastors who, to no fault of their own, they are great pastors and effective ministry leaders, and they grow their churches and ministries beyond their experience level. And because they don't know what else to do, they start to go towards a controlling leadership style. Again, because we have such a need for volunteers, we start to control people into volunteerism just so we can keep our head above water. And as a lead pastor, we feel this the most, more than the youth pastor, kids pastor, executive pastor. As a lead pastor, we know that in the end, it all rests on our shoulders. And so we begin to have this idea that I have to get people into ministry positions and volunteer positions just to keep everything running so that it doesn't fail, so it doesn't fall apart, so that people are ministered to. And we start getting caught up in this need to control more than our need to serve. And that's the challenge, and that's the question that I'm wanting to wrestle with us today, is an evaluation of where we are in our leadership. We have been through a very challenging last couple of years. For some of us who are, we have gone through many different stages of ministry over the last 2 years, where we've shut down and we've opened up, and we've shut down again and opened up, and we've gone to video venues, and then we've gone to reserving seats, and we've gone to all these different ways of doing church, all so that we can continue to serve our people, and so we can continue to keep the church together and the ministries working. And for some of us, because we have gone through uncharted waters, and we've had to ministry hack our way through the last 2 years, some of us have forgotten how to serve and influence from a place of servanthood. And we've started to rely on our positional power, or our authority by title, and we've started to control people into the positions of volunteerism, or into doing the things we need them to do in order to keep things running. And so what I want to do today is just do a little check of where are you? Because again, this can happen to any of us. Even the best pastors out there, the most influential pastors, the most humble pastors, always run this risk. One of the things that Pastor Jim always says is that his greatest battle is the battle of his own heart. Because we all fight that. Almost all of us, I would say to some degree, all of us, we entered into ministry. You entered into ministry because you believe God was calling you into ministry, because God gave you a heart to serve people. And so on some level, all of us enter ministry with this idea that we want to help people, serve people. I don't think any of us went into ministry with this idea that I want to be rich and famous and be a superstar pastor. None of us necessarily went in with that idea or that mentality. But some of us somehow end up getting too much power, and we lose sight of servanthood. I've seen some pastors, they have created this world of ministry for them where they are the center of ministry. Not God, not even the mission, not the Great Commission itself, but them. And they've built these little kingdoms of churches that are heavily reliant on them and heavily reliant on their influence. And again, I think some of that is because we struggle so much with how is this going to reflect on me? Again, if you're a lead pastor, this falls on you all the time. If the church falls apart, who are they going to look at? The youth pastor, it's his fault? No. The executive pastor? No. They're going to look at you. And sometimes we don't have the security or the confidence to be okay with that. We struggle. We struggle with this need to control everything around us. And you know what? You're in good company, because there were a couple of disciples who had the same idea, the same mentality. Now, they weren't in ministry yet, and they weren't really in charge of anything, but they had this question: who are the greatest? This is a question the disciples struggled with of themselves. Who's the greatest? Who does Jesus favor the most? Even to the point where their mother gets involved. James and John's mother gets involved and says, "Hey, you have this this kingdom that you're putting together and you're building, and you have a right and a left, and I have two sons, and so it just happens to work out that maybe we should work together, and my two sons can be your right and left, and they could be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." And I don't know about you, but it's easy to read that and look at that and say, man, what is wrong with these guys? Like, they're walking with Jesus and they're squabbling over who's the greatest. But the reality is you and I do the same thing. We go to ministry conferences, or we go to minister gatherings and get-togethers, and what do? We ask the question, how many people are attending your church? How big's your church? How many people do you have on staff? How many pastoral staff do you have? How many outreach events have you done? And I am a huge proponent of metrics, and I'm a huge proponent of knowing what the data is. And most of us consciously ask those questions because we truly are curious. I know for me, if I'm talking to a pastor, it's nice to know how big the church is, so I have a context of talk to the pastor in. But I also know that when I get an answer, there's this part of me deep inside, no matter how much I suppress it and ignore it, there's a part of me that wants to have a bigger church than the next guy, or have a bigger ministry than the next guy, or do something greater than someone else. And so this who is the greatest question doesn't go away, but it continues in all of us. And we continue to struggle with it. And we continue to have to deal with this need for comparison, this need for power, and this need for measuring ourselves up against one another. And who usually loses in this, ultimately, are the people that we lead. The people that follow us get caught up in all of that. If you and I, as pastors, if we get this me mentality, this me first idea, then the people that suffer are the people in our congregations, and then the people in our communities that we're not reaching. Whole churches have fallen apart because the pastors get this me first mentality. And if they don't fall apart, you have whole congregations that get so caught up in the personality and personhood of one individual that they lose sight of the personhood of Jesus Christ himself. And we have whole groups of people serving a person rather than the Lord. And that's a scary place for us to be. I know for me, that's a scary place. If I look around a ministry and it's built on me, it scares me. because I don't want that. I don't want it to be built on me. And I'm guessing you consciously don't want to be built on you. But here's the other side of this. We have this subconscious part of us that's always active and always working and has no moral compass whatsoever. This is why Scripture tells us to bring every thought under the obedience of Christ, because there is a subconscious part of who we are that is constantly fighting against us. And it has no moral compass unless we intentionally bring it under the submission of the authority of Christ. And so, let me just give you a few questions that Pastor Jim puts in his book to see. You can do a litmus test on your own ministry and your own life and ask the question, am I serving in ministry from a me first attitude? Here are the questions. Do you think, whether consciously or subconsciously, do you have the thought, as the leader, as the pastor, I'm entitled to special privileges? You've worked hard. You've done more than everybody else. You're entitled to special privileges, right? If that's the question that you have in your mind, if that's something you're saying from time to time, then you need to probably pause and ask yourself, do I have a me first mentality? Another question, or another thought. Anything I do in leadership must ultimately benefit me. And this is really hard, because if we are servant leaders, then we must always operate in this idea that I take a back seat. I'm second to everything else going on. I serve people first. I influence for the sake of others. How about, my team is here to make me look good? I've served some leaders with this mentality, where it was very clear that my job on their staff was to make sure they look good, or at the very least, make sure they don't look bad. Is that a thought that you have in your ministry? Or, people who disagree with me are my enemies. Can you take on a disagreement? Can you deal with a disagreement? Can people challenge you and you not get all upset and flustered and thrown off? If you can't, then there's a good chance that you're operating from a me first mentality. Now, before you start beating yourself up or getting too frustrated or, questioning yourself or your abilities or whatever, let me reiterate, we have all been there at some point, and we all fight this battle all the time. For me, the reason I bring this up is because I think it's a question that we constantly have to ask ourselves. Am I serving with a me first attitude, or am I serving with a them first attitude? Am I putting my congregation, am I putting my community, I'm putting my staff, my pastoral staff, am I putting them before me? Because if I am, then things are good. And I am leading, I'm wielding power in such a way that is strengthening my leadership. Because I promise you, every pastoral staff member on your team will love to serve you if you are serving them first, particularly if you have millennials on your team. If you serve them, they will be fiercely loyal to you. But if you put yourself first, you will lose them in a heartbeat, because they sense it, they know it, and they will serve someone else because they have no loyalty, because you haven't shown the loyalty to them. Are you operating in a me first attitude in your leadership? Because if you are, you're on a dangerous path. Now, let me clarify something too, because, as you may know, here at Ministry Hackers, the biggest thing we talk about is how to live this dream life in ministry. And I am firmly a believer of this idea that God has designed a dream life for you in ministry. And I believe that he wants you to live that life. Now, I don't know what that looks like. For some of you, that it may be this life of traveling the world and preaching the gospel and being an evangelist or whatever. That may be the life that he has designed for you, the dream life he's designed for you. Or maybe the dream life that he's created for you is a very simple life in a small town with your family, and you're hiking and you're doing things, and you have this deep love and admiration for one another, and you have these deep relationships in this little community. I don't know what it is. And I don't think any of us can define what our dream life is for someone else. But I do think that we can seek the face of God and ask him what our dream life is for us. And that's not a me first mentality. That's not saying, hey, I'm going to live this lavish lifestyle on the backs of my congregants and their tithes. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that too many of us live lives that are overly difficult, overly challenging, overly detrimental to our personal health, our mental health, our physical health. We're living a ministry life like that. And I don't think that's what God has called us to. And so I want to make sure that we're not getting living a dream life in ministry and a me first mentality mixed up, because that's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we serve others fiercely, love God, love people, sacrifice on our end. But at the same time, we take care of ourselves, live a healthy, balanced life in such a way that we can serve more and be more influential and more impactful. That's what I want for you. That's what I want for all of our members in the Ministry Hacker community. Because I think for too long, pastors and ministry leaders have suffered needlessly and sacrificed their families, their health, and some of them their lives in ways that they were never meant to. And so this is my challenge to you today, is get rid of that me first mentality. If you sense it, if you feel it, get some accountability, ask some people who are close to you, ask the question, am I living a me first mentality in my ministry? Because if you are, then let's start taking steps to backtrack that and become servant minded once again. And if you are living a life that is full of service, full of love and compassion, and full of giving to those around you, then it's time you start seeking out what your dream life in ministry really looks like. Because it's time for you to start living it. God has it. It's designed for you. It's out there. You just have to discover what that looks like. And that's my hope and my dream for each of you, is that you live your dream life that God has designed for you, where ministry is at the center, but your personal life is also healthy and strong. All right? I hope you have a great day, and I hope this resonates with you. Again, Pastor Jim is a great pastor. He's a great friend of mine, a wonderful mentor for me at a very pivotal point in my life, and he's worth listening to. And so, again, check out his book if you get a chance. Lead So Others Can Follow is the name of the book. Check it out. A previous episode, we interviewed Pastor Jim about the book. And so I want to encourage you, check it out. But again, ask yourself those questions. Am I living a me first mentality ministry? Because if you are, you're on a dangerous path. And don't forget, if you want to revamp or build out your website in the next 30 days, go to brandonpartycooper.com/30-day website, get your free guide, start working on it today. In 30 days, you have all up and running just in time for Easter. All right. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next episode.